Hello and welcome back to JVCTR. For those of you that are new, my name is Johnny and today I wanted to give you an update on the REVO software for the MK8 Fiesta ST, as I've now covered just under 1,000 miles. Now, as I mentioned in my intro, I have nearly covered 1,000 miles since the REVO software was installed on my car. And I'm glad to report that there isn't a lot to report. The car has performed faultlessly as expected, and it's really been smiles all the way. As nothing really dramatic has happened in my first 1,000 miles, I thought I'd make a video to tell you a little bit more about what it's like to live with the REVO software and generally what it's like. Now, I'll start with the weather. Obviously this time of year is not the best time of year to have a really powerful front-wheel drive car, and this car is currently on the stock Michelin Super Sports, which are really good in the dry, but when it's wet and cold they're not great, so perhaps the car could benefit with some slightly more suitable tyres. Now, on the subject of changing tyres and modifications, let's talk about the mods you need to make in order to run power like this. And as I mentioned in my first video, the development cars of the REVO software are making around about 240 to 250 horsepower, although official figures are yet to be released. And if we compare that to the Mark 7, for example, you have to make quite a few modifications in order to get anywhere near that power level. Now, if we just pop the bonnet, as you can see under my hood, everything is pretty much standard, apart from a cone filter, which is not necessary to run this kit. Now, if you remember with the Mark 7s, in order to achieve between 230 to 240 brake horsepower, less than what this is producing, you needed to upgrade an intercooler, the intake, and at the back of the engine, the downpipe coming from the turbo as well. And the problem with making all those hardware changes is that it makes it rather expensive. So in comparison, this REVO map on the MK8 Fiesta ST, although it's a bold claim, I think may actually be one of the best value mods for the MK8 Fiesta ST. Now, at time of filming, REVO have yet to announce their pricing for this new software. But if you consider that getting this power level requires all that hardware of the Mark 7, it's going to be significantly cheaper than the Stage 2 package of the Mark 7 to get sort of similar power. Now, for those of you who watched my track day video, you will be aware that I was particularly unimpressed with the stock brakes. I mean, I was managing maybe 3 or 4 laps of Abingdon before these were completely overheating and just no good, really. And that was running stock power. Now, one of the other development cars with the REVO software on has also done a track day on stock pads, but running the REVO software, and well, the pads were completely destroyed. So at a very bare minimum, when running this software, I would recommend at least a pad upgrade. I mean, they're okay for road, but if you're doing anything more than fast road, then yeah, definitely look at upgrading the brakes. Anyway, enough chatter, let's get on the road and I'll show you a little bit more about the REVO software.
Throw this shade on me, like they all hate on me. Don't bring that rage on me. Why they throwing shade on me, like they ashamed on me? I thought, what age are we?
Okay, so you join me in the car where I am chilling out. So it's cold outside, I've got my heated seat on, heated steering wheel, and of course, drive mode is in comfort. Now, what I like about this is obviously I can class this car as a modified car now. I guess it's a bit faster and it's got a loud exhaust. But the best thing, above all, with the Mark 8 is these switchable drive modes. Now, the reason I say that is when you go down the modification route, you often end up with a droney exhaust, and there's some compromises to be had for going fast. But in comfort mode, I must admit, it's just as comfy as it ever has been in stock. The Miltech exhaust is doing a great job of keeping the exhaust noise lower. Throttle response is a bit meh, but I mean, it was like that as stock. And the REVO map has really not made too much difference in terms of comfort. when in comfort mode. The only thing I would say about the REVO software is, of course, that power is still there in comfort mode, which means if you do need to pull out or you need to overtake, it's pretty much effortless now. The only thing I would say is comfort mode really does just remove all that drama. So if you need to just go fast and not shout about it, then you can still do that in comfort mode. And it is quite nice to have the extra power, I must admit. Now, of course, there's going to be times where you want a bit more drama, so that's when you knock it into sport or race. Now, I must admit, I actually spend most of my time in sport and race, even when I'm not hooning it, just because it's really nice to drive now it's been mapped. So even when just sort of trundling around like I am now, the exhaust, you get a few more burbles, and it's nothing too intrusive, but they're there. It just adds a little something to the driving experience, and I quite like that. And of course, when you do want to hoon it, ooh, it performs. That still makes me laugh. The one thing I would say is that since I've had this software installed, not a day goes by where I put my foot down in pretty much any gear, third gear being the most noticeable, and there's a little voice in my head that goes, ooh, that's a bit faster than I thought it was going to be. And it still gets me, even after like nearly 1,000 miles, it still gets me. And I really like that. That's what I like about remapping a car, is every day you get a little surprise, and I quite like that. It's quite cool.
That torrent of love.
Now, one of the good things about modern remapping technology, if you like, is the fact that you can have it and it not really interfere with your day-to-day life. Now, obviously the car is quite a bit faster and it feels it, but you can drive this car like a normal car. Now, my other half drives this car quite often actually, and she is not too much of a petrol head, but of course she had her thoughts and feelings on the REVO software herself, and she simply said it's nice to drive, which I think sums up the package, to be honest. Now, I did have a request from a Matt Rosell for some Pov driving action. So here we go. Matt, if you're watching, this is for you. So, there you go. Hopefully that's enough of an indication of what it's like behind the driving seat. Okay, so that is enough hooning for one day, and I wanted to pull over and talk to you about this. Now, if I'm honest, I didn't really see the point in this until I got one, and now I think it's really cool. So let me show you. Now, when you install REVO software on your car, you have the option of purchasing one of these. This is an SPS device, or what REVO call their serial port switch. And what that does is allow you to switch between maps dependent on your fuel type. Now, if you watched my first video where I had the software installed, we did some data logging, and you would have noticed that on the 98 RON fuel map, I was pulling out a bit of timing, and that's because at the time of filming, this car had some pretty crap fuel in it, if I'm going to be brutally honest. So now, Up until the point of that tank being empty, I ran it on 95. I then used this SPS device to switch to 98 RON once I'd filled up with V-Power. Other brands are available. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really notice a huge step up in performance by switching fuels, but with a modified car, I think it's always better to run the best fuel you can, and if Revo provided a map for that fuel, then of course you're gonna run it. Now, let me show you how to switch maps because it is quite cool. Now, to switch maps, firstly start the car. You can do it with the ignition on, but the car off, but I prefer to do it with the engine on so I can tell when it's taken. And then simply switch to the map you'd like to switch to. So I'm gonna go for number 2, which I know is my 95 RON map fuel. And when you buy one of these, your dealer will print out which numbers the maps correlate to. So yeah, we'll go for number 2. Simply plug it in, wait for it to beep, and you're done. Done, that's it, you switched. How quick is that? That is awesome. Now this thing runs over the CAN bus system, which is why it's really quick. And I understand that you're probably sat there thinking, well, why does that matter? I don't have to switch fuel like all the time, so why would you bother with one of these? Well, the biggest thing that sold it for me is something called anti-theft mode. So that is program 1. Now, if you put it into anti-theft mode, there you go, quick as that, straight into anti-theft. You may be able to hear the car from where you are there. The idle has dropped to 500 RPM, so I can't really move the car at all on the clutch. And of course, the throttle doesn't work either. So even if the Crims were to get in either with or without a key, they can start the car, but they can't move it unless they have one of these and know how to use it. And then when you're ready to move back, you put it back to your desired fuel map. So I'm going for number 4, that's my 98 RON map. Plug it in. And there you go, that's the car back to its normal self. So there you have it, that was the REVO SPS device. Pretty cool, I thought, and also my thoughts and feelings on the REVO map as a whole after my first nearly 1,000 miles. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I apologise if I'm a little bit washed out. That winter sun's really low, and yeah, nice to see you, but not. Anyway, I'm waffling. If you enjoyed this review, please feel free to subscribe, like, all that good stuff, and I'll catch you in the next one.
There goes a sight from my soul.